Hello and welcome, I'm your storyteller. I know many of you press play on these videos to help you fall asleep, and that's exactly what this space is for: peace, comfort, and calm. Before you drift off, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps this quiet corner of the internet reach more people who need rest. And one more thing before we begin, let me know in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Now, take a deep breath, settle in, and let the story unfold. Story 1. The Man Who Sold Second Chances. There's a man who visits town once a year. No one knows where he comes from. No one ever sees him arrive. No one ever sees him leave. But every summer, without fail, just after midnight in the muggy August heat, he appears. Under a starless, inky black sky, he sits behind a small wooden booth at the edge of the old highway, displaying a sign boasting "Second Chances, Fair Prices." I'd never deigned to visit the rickety, carnivalesque stand that promised a different future. It was meant for those who regret. This isn't to say I didn't have more than a few choices in life I saw as being worthy of. Second-guessing, but there was nothing that I looked upon with reproach. There was no desperate need for repentance that bubbled deep within my gut. No desire to visit the man who sold second chances. But in late March, when the first signs of sweetness from blooming magnolia trees tinged the air, a decision settled itself so deeply in the recesses of my consciousness that every moment was filled with a cold, merciless weight, refusing to settle in my chest. Pangs of guilt ricocheted wildly against my ribcage, rebounding off of bone like a ball-peen hammer on steel, with each impact leaving a sharp, ringing ache that built an unbearable pressure in my sternum. But I deserved these inescapable feelings. I deserved to have been granted this ceaseless collision of regret and remorse, leaving behind the unbearable knowledge that the past cannot be undone. It was such a simple favour. A text reading, "Can you come pick me up? I've got a weird feeling and I don't feel safe walking anymore." Followed by 3 missed calls, then the frantic voicemail, "Seriously, please pick up. I think this guy's following me." Another missed call, then radio silence. I noticed all of this at just past 1 in the morning. The messages and calls had been left in succession. 11:42 p.m, 11:47 p.m, 11:53 p.m, 11:54 p.m. Nothing, nothing, nothing. I had silenced my phone because I was studying, and as soon as I saw how serious things seemed to be, why Emily had tried to contact me so many times, I called back. No answer. I ran to my car, panic-stricken and feverishly dialing and redialing her number. I knew where she had been and the route she would have taken to get home, but no matter how many times I retraced the steps my friend would have taken just an hour ago, the street remained empty. It's June now and the search for Emily has fizzled out. The police have resigned to the belief that she is dead, and if nothing has been discovered at this point, a body will likely never be found. The case files will sit in a cardboard box gathering dust, "Unsolved" scrawled in block letters across its front. Silencing my phone that night isn't the decision that carried so much shame. No, the shame stemmed from a decision I had made after that. Amongst the string of texts and missed calls, there was a piece of evidence that condemned me to this misery. A single message that led me to the man who sold second chances. Read 11:43 p.m. The sickly, sweet smell of magnolia heavily perfumed the air. It's August, and their blossoms have almost all but disappeared from their spindly perches in the trees, littering the ground with rotting corpse petals that signal the end of summer. But the stench that lingered on the breeze brought with it a reminder. Soon, a makeshift booth would be constructed on the edge of town, and soon I'd be given the opportunity to pick up my phone. The opportunity to live the rest of my life without having to stare at that last text, listen to that voicemail. The opportunity to hear more in my friend's voice than fear, and so I waited. There was no set date for when the man would appear to construct his booth, but there were signs to look for. There would be no stars, and the night sky would be a deep void of blackness, without even the subtle glow of the moon to offer any reprieve. People in town said these astrological anomalies happened because all the possibilities of all the second chances needed to be the only thing people looked towards. I don't know how much I believed this superstition, but I did believe in the man. I believed in what he offered, and finally the night came. It was August 19th when I looked up and noticed that there was no light to be found. Heaven was no longer the thing providing a path forward. The man who sold second chances had come to town. I got in my car and drove to where the main thoroughfare in town branched off into a few side streets, one of which eventually turned into the worn road that was now the old highway. Once I came across it, I parked my car and started to walk. I didn't know how far I'd need to go, but I knew to trust the path that I was on. The minutes ticked by and I kept walking, and doubt started to creep into the edges of my mind. And then, there he was. He wasn't as odd as I thought he would be. He looked pretty normal. Maybe normal isn't the right word, but unassuming. He wasn't old, but he wasn't young either. He wore a shabby, colourless suit, and from under his booth the toes of a pair of polished wingtips jutted out. I approached and noticed how worn the wood was, how faded the sign. How long had he been doing this? Who was he really? I didn't know what to say, or where to start. My chest was aching with the same guilt it had carried for months, and the pulse of my heart had quickened to an erratic rhythm, urgent and desperate like a trapped bird beating its wings against a cage. But before I could calm myself enough to speak, the man reached out and beckoned for me to take his hand. The moment our hands touched, everything slipped away except for the feeling of his dry, waxy skin against mine. And then my mind was bursting with memories. Not just the memory of my decision, but all of the paths that could have been. I couldn't make sense of any of them. There was too much going on. All I could discern were the millions, no trillions of possibilities branching outward, shimmering like frayed threads of reality. The man who sold. Second chances did not have to ask me what I wanted. He knew. He had felt it in me long before I arrived. The gnawing, marrow-deep ache of regret. The weight of a mistake that had been festering like an open wound that refused to heal. And he was showing me that it didn't have to be so. Just as I thought the overwhelming rush of possibilities was going to make my head explode, a voice, his voice, unfolded inside of my skull like paper being peeled away. "Are you sure?" he said. "Knowledge is free, but second chances are costly." There wasn't an ounce of hesitation in my nod. Abruptly, our hands disconnected, and I knew I had made a horrible mistake. I started to notice things about him I hadn't noticed before. His suit didn't fit him, but not in any way that made sense. It seemed as though it wasn't meant for the body beneath it, too loose in places that should have hugged him, too tight where there should have been space. And I swear as I stared it shifted, the fabric rippling like it was breathing. His tie hung too low, too thin. Its texture wasn't silky, but more like something wet, something living, and it writhed when he moved. The buttons were all wrong too, mismatched in size and shape, and when he moved they didn't catch the light like normal metal. They absorbed it, as if each one were a tiny sightless eye. And that's when I realised the man who sold second chances was no man at all. Not really. He wore the shape of a man, long-limbed, draped in an ill-fitting suit that moved against his frame like it was trying to swallow him whole. His fingers were too long, jointed in the wrong places, the knuckles swollen and bulbous, flexing under pale purple-veined skin. His face was wrong, a stretched waxen mockery of human skin with a too-wide mouth that unfolded like a wound. Inside, his teeth looked like splintered bone, frayed at the edges, as if he had been chewing on something he shouldn't have. Something still alive. And his eyes. God, his eyes. They weren't where they should be. They drifted, sliding too far apart or pressing too close together, like they were never meant to stay in one place. My racing thoughts that were trying to make sense of the grotesque thing that had been revealed to me were interrupted by a sound. No, a sensation. A whisper that burrowed under my skin, an ache in my teeth, a shudder that reached the marrow in my bones. The man was not speaking in words, he was unravelling them, like an old tape playing backward, filling the air with the sense that the price for what I had just agreed to would be far more than I had bargained for. And there was always a price. The man who sold second chances doesn't work like a genie, granting wishes for his freedom from the lamp. Nor is he like the devil at the crossroads, dealing a way out as the consequence of an impossible trade. No, The man who sold second chances promises a fair price, and his gifts are neither miracles nor curses. They are something far more unnatural, something that feels like time itself shuddering, unravelling, stitching itself back together in ways it was never meant to. Money meant nothing to him. What he wanted was regret, sorrow, mistakes. And so, when he reached out his veined, leathery hands to clasp mine too gently, too intimately he took. Now, my regret had teeth. What had once sat in my chest like a stone lodged too deep, pressing against my lungs, making every breath feel shallow, unearned, was now gnashing, gnawing, devouring me, driven by a hunger that could never be sated. It was tearing at my insides like a starving animal, strings of saliva stretching between its jagged, restless fangs, mindlessly consuming whatever was caught between them. The hole inside of me grew wider, and the world around me felt a little more wrong with each passing second. And then there was nothing. This was almost worse than the unnatural, insatiable guilt. Now there was a tension left behind, a coil in its jaw as it waited, anticipating the next bite. This pause in feeling left my thoughts twitching, as if stopping the contrition I had become accustomed to was more unbearable than the act of feeling it itself. I snapped back to reality, finally able to focus my vision for the first time in what felt like hours, only to see that I was home. Checking my phone, I confirmed it was just after midnight on August 19th, and I noticed a text from Emily. "Did you do the summer reading? Class starts in 2 days and there's no way I'm going to finish. I was hoping to borrow your notes. Sent 20 minutes ago." My second chance had been granted, but what was a fair price for the life of my friend? The past has been rewritten seamlessly. The guilt that had found a home in my chest was gone, but deep down I knew it wasn't free. Had allowing the man to feed on my misery been enough? That didn't feel right. The only thing that felt fair was a life for a life. I hurriedly opened up my laptop and searched missing persons plus March plus Banneridge, Maine, and found what I was looking for. A series of articles that had once been about Emily. Local woman goes missing after night out. The search is on for missing woman, missing persons case goes cold. But the headlines had changed. Now the face of another woman is staring back at me from the flyers splashed across every web page. Emily was meant to die that night, but by undoing fate, I doomed someone else to take on her final moments instead. My mistake never happened, but someone else paid the price for me. Another woman walked home alone in Emily's place. I searched the woman's name, hoping to find out something about her that would make me feel better about my decision. She was a teacher, a new mother, someone's wife, someone's friend, just like Emily had been mine. I was going to be sick. I ran to the bathroom and retched, clearing my stomach of its contents, bile burning my throat. I splashed water on my face and looked in the mirror, and a scream ripped from my lungs. It wasn't my reflection staring at me. It was hers, the woman who took Emily's place. She was staring, hollow-eyed, lips moving without sound. I could only just barely make out what she was trying to communicate. Was it worth it? And that's when I realised why the man who sold second chances appears when there are no stars, when the sky's devoid of all light. It's not so that people could look towards their second chances with hope. It was so that when you paid, your grief had nowhere to go. It was so that when your second chance was granted, you'd be left with nothing inside but an even deeper guilt. A depth so dark, so hollow, it felt like looking into a hole dug too deep, a hole that had no bottom, and on that, he could feast. Second chances are not given. They are taken, stolen, carved from the bones of time itself, and the man who sells them will always be there for those who need them most. Story 2, Black-Eyed Susan. Back when I grew up in rural Minnesota, my mother wanted me to keep in touch with my Scandinavian roots. We haven't lived in the Nordic countries for 3 generations, but there are still a couple of things that stick around. Behavioural quirks, mostly, and a couple of traditions that have been with our family for as long as anyone can remember. Putting porridge out for the forest gnomes was one thing. Mum used to trick me with these dolls that she'd put in the snow and point to, saying, "Don't move too fast, you'll scare them." And let's not talk about dancing around the maypole. That stuff's just embarrassing. But the most peculiar tradition is the one about A Midsummer Night's Dream. I know that's a Shakespeare title, but it's also a traditional Scandinavian thing. It goes a little something like this. On the evening of midsummer, you're to collect 7 kinds of wildflowers. Then you bundle them up and put them under your pillow. If you do, you're supposed to dream of your one true love. Now I have 3 sisters. They were all about romance and predestination, and I couldn't have cared less if I wanted to. But every year they'd walk hand in hand, collecting wildflowers and putting them under their pillows. And since I was too young to wander off on my own, I had to stick around. That is, until they decided it was my turn. It was my oldest sister who made the call. She was 12 and I'd just turned 7, but she figured the earlier the better. "You have to tell us what she looks like," she said. "Like if she's tall or thin or fat." "I bet she's fat," said my second oldest sister. "Statistically, she's Chinese or Indian," said the other. "That's where there are most girls." I tried to ignore them, but their cackling got on my nerves. They gathered up some silky aster, blue-eyed grass, silverleaf, wild bergamot, blue sunflowers and ground plum, but couldn't get a 7th one. They looked around but couldn't find one. I just wanted to go home, so I picked up the first thing I saw, sticking out next to a rusted-out barrel. "How about this one?" I said, holding up a yellow flower with a black spot. "That's a black-eyed Susan," said my oldest sister. "You're gonna marry a Susan," grinned another. "Little Susie Woo, gonna love you who," sing-sang the last. I rolled my eyes so hard that they almost popped out of my head as they cackled and teased, putting my hair up in a bow. They bundled up the wildflowers and made me sleep with them under my pillow. I didn't notice anything strange at first. Just a night like any other. You have such vivid dreams when you're a kid. Like everything just happens faster. You even sleep faster. But this was something else entirely. It wasn't just a dream. It was an experience. And the worst part is, I didn't even remember it. I just remembered it was bad. Really, really bad. It was so bad that I completely blocked it out. I don't even remember waking up. I just remember laying in the bathtub submerged in cold water. I looked up at my 3 sisters. They looked terrified. My throat was hoarse and I was wide awake. But I couldn't even remember going to bed. "Does it hurt?" my oldest asked. Her voice was different. Lower. Careful. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I'm okay." "It sounded like it hurt," she continued, "like it really hurt. I think it was a bad dream." "Was it her?" asked my younger sister. "Did you dream of her?" I couldn't tell. It was just a dark space in the back of my mind that made my pulse shiver when I thought about it. And yet, I knew the answer. "Yeah," I said. "It was Black-Eyed Susan." Now, I've been teased by my sister my whole life, but they never teased me about Black-Eyed Susan. They'd never seen me like that. I'd woken up screaming at the top of my lungs, rolling around on the floor. They thought I was having a seizure. They took me to the bathroom while my mum called an ambulance. We didn't talk much about it. They never had me checked for epilepsy, and I was perfectly healthy otherwise. They talked a little about it being some kind of allergic reaction, but I'd never seen a reaction like that. Over time, we came to this unspoken conclusion, that those wildflowers gave me the worst nightmare of my life, and in that nightmare I saw my one true love, Black-Eyed Susan. I wouldn't think much about that night over the years to come. It became this distant memory, like your first cold, but every now and then, particularly around midsummer, I would try to remember what that dream had been like, and something inside me would sink into this bottomless hole in my chest. It teased me. I could concentrate and I'd see it, but I didn't want to. To have forgotten was a blessing, and I knew better than to challenge it. But it's a weird headspace to live in, to have concepts such as true love and marriage so closely associated with trauma, especially since all other couples in my life were perfectly fine role models. My mother and father were an extraordinary couple, and while my sisters had some dating life drama, nothing bad ever really happened to them. So as I got into my teenage years, I didn't want to chase girls and flirt. I didn't want to fall in love. I joked about it a lot, but the feeling of meeting my one true love felt like throwing my soul down an endless pit. I tried to rationalise it away. It was just a stupid phase, a quirk. It became like a fun party story to tell in my late teens. It was funny in a way, saying I used to believe in such things. But there was an asterisk stuck to that story every time I told it. A little white lie. I never stopped believing in it. It started to really bother me when I was about 17. At that point I'd been in short relationships, and I'd been in love. But I couldn't stop thinking that it wasn't real, that true love was out there, and that it was terrifying. something that would make my heart sink into my stomach. So I decided to just bite the bullet and try the whole thing again to face my fears. So that midsummer, I put together 7 types of wildflowers again, ending with a black-eyed Susan. As kids, we're very good at handling pain. Or at least we're resilient. We have time to heal, but when you're 17 it hits differently. When I went to bed that night I had cold sweats, and I couldn't stop thinking about what was waiting behind my closed eyes. Would there be a reaction at all, or had I wasted all this time being anxious about nothing? I closed my eyes and tried not to think about it. I counted down from 100, then 200. I twisted and turned, trying to get the sweaty covers to stop sticking to my skin. At the slightest stretch, my eyes would pop open. I'd get this ache in my face from trying to keep them closed. But after hours, something clicked. My muscles relaxed, and I caught a whiff of the flowers from under my pillow, and something inside me screamed at me to turn back, to open my eyes. But it was too late. It felt like looking at the bottom of a pool, but straight ahead. A reflective shimmer, ethereal but physical at the same time, like a night sky that you can push your hands through. I fumbled with my hands, trying to find something to hold on to. There was this swirl in the back of my head, like having a large drink on an empty stomach. Something reached for me and touched my fingertips, something as hard as fingernails. It poked and prodded me from different angles. A strange voice seeped through me, neutral, genderless, and with an unusual pronunciation. "Where have you been?" it asked. I tried to regain my footing, but there was nothing to hold on to, just these protrusions from the dark. Finally, I felt myself slowing down. A steadiness, control. Something came out of the dark, eyes so black that their head looked hollow against the night. A vaguely human skull connected to an infinite mass, like a broken flower growing out of cracked concrete. Muscle and vein contracting and compounding at every angle, ripples of flesh with every offset heartbeat. It's been so long. Something wrapping around my ankle, tightening. "Come home." My eyes snapped open, but I wasn't awake. I could feel her wrapped around my ankle. I pulled away the covers and watched my foot turn blue. It was bending, and I felt nothing. Then the bone snapped. I've never experienced something like that. I've never broken a bone, and experiencing a tremalleolar fracture in the comfort of your own bed is inhuman. It hurts so bad you lose bladder control, and I couldn't do anything but to fall out of bed and writhe on the floor, but the pain wouldn't go away. I just screamed. I tried to reach for my phone, but it's like it refused to let me reach it. A neighbour heard me. Help came. It would take time for the leg to heal, but bones mend all the time. But true love doesn't. I pushed the thought of love and marriage out of my life for over a decade. I would shy away from coy smiles and flowery laughter. Some people thought I had a problem with my sexuality. Others thought I was under some kind of religious repression. I tried to explain that relationships just weren't my thing, but it's hard to explain without a reason. If I was really pressed about it, I'd say it was a childhood trauma. That usually stopped the questions. I'd do this for years. A string of short-term relationships where I kept hoping and praying I wouldn't fall in love. Anything to keep me away from that dark space. I couldn't tell what was going to happen if I met someone who'd make me feel things. Real things. But life isn't so simple. It would take me years, but when I turned 31, I met her. Lilia hit me like a summer's breeze the first time I talked to her. It was a birthday party, and she was invited by a mutual friend of ours. Lilia had been working overtime and forgotten all about the party, so she joined at the last minute. She showed up in an oversized hoodie and yesterday's jeans, spending most of the night at the snack table looking at her phone. Her enthusiasm started and stopped at bobbing her head to the music. When I saw that we were out of pretzels, I went up to talk to her. "Looking for snacks?" I asked. "Your mum's a snack," she snapped back. "All right, yeah, but I was talking about the pretzels." She looked at me like I'd struck gold. She'd been so hell-bent on the idea that I was coming up to hit on her that it never even crossed her mind that she'd eaten a full bowl of salty pretzels. She snort-laughed, apologised, and I felt my heart skip a beat. I knew it was trouble. I liked her. Lilia was a work-from-home back-end developer. She spent most of her days trying to steer her team through rough deadlines and absurd last-minute changes. She explained it as trying to teach cats algebra while falling out of an airplane. She cycled through periods of insane stress to weeks of coasting, which she'd made into an absurd routine, clearly something she couldn't keep up forever. We didn't start dating right away. We chatted a bit and found out we had a lot in common. She'd been dating this one guy since she was 14 years old and had only recently turned single, so she wasn't eager to get back on the market. She didn't mind my vague trauma. She just liked being around me. I think our friends realised we were dating long before Lilia or I did. We just spent time together until one day when we didn't want it to stop. Still, I couldn't help but think of Black-Eyed Susan. No matter how soothing Lilia's snores were, I could still lay awake at night. There was a warmth in my chest as I imagined the smell of wildflowers from my pillow, an ache in my leg where I could touch the scars. If I were to truly fall in love, what would happen? Those nights came more often, from once every 6 months or so to every week. After having dated for about a year, Lilia was eager to help me get over the whole thing. She knew it was a trauma, and she knew I didn't want to talk about it, but she couldn't let it go. And of course she couldn't. She was in a loving relationship with a man who couldn't say he loved her, and all she knew was that something had happened. It got to a point where it was driving a wedge between us. She wanted to help, and I wanted her to understand, and I could only think of one way to show her. I had to do it again. On midsummer, we went outside to pick flowers. Lilia was excited, but her smile faded when she felt how serious I was. I did what I'd done every other time. I picked 6 types, and a final flower would pop out of nowhere. And of course, it'd be the Black-Eyed Susan. I bundled them all up. I could feel a phantom pain cutting into my leg, which gave me a limp. "So what are these for?" she asked. "For sleep," I said, "and I'm going to need your help." "Sure, yeah, whatever you need. If it looks bad, I need you to wake me up." "How do I know if it's bad?" I shook my head and took her by the hand. "You'll know." I did some preparations. I had gauze and painkillers. Lilia was prepared to call for help if necessary. She still had no idea what was going on, but I could tell she was nervous. Then again, so was I. Problem was, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, and she watched me. After about an hour, she crawled up next to me. She knew it was something that happened when I slept, but she wanted to calm me down. "I need you to see this," I said. "It's okay," she whispered. "Go to sleep. Promise you'll keep watch." "I promise." I didn't turn my head to look. I trusted her. So I closed my eyes, let my breathing slow, and felt my head fill with the smell of wildflowers. It was like waking up again. A mild tingle covering my body, like being draped in spider webs. I blinked and blinked, but it was all black. A long, drawn-out breath echoed like a field of sighing flowers. Beautiful. A growth coming out of the dark, translucent like living glass hardening into soft marble. A woman dragging her legs through the night like she was trudging through a swamp. She grabbed me by the hand, pulling me along. It felt like I was carried through a current. I could see the bedroom from above. I lay there, and Lilia was sitting next to me. I can't really explain what it felt like. Sort of like watching your reflection blink. I could see her struggling to stay awake, nodding on and off. She was trying so hard. "Is that what beautiful looks like?" Black-Eyed Susan asked. "I don't even know what you are," I said. "Of course you do," she said. "I am your one true love." The words slithered. A drawn-outs poisoned the air. I tried not to look at her. It was like the opposite of staring into a sun. The light in your eyes begin to die, and you can feel yourself grow colder, slower. "You can't be," I said. "It's impossible." "But I am," she said. "You love me." She turned her attention to the room hovering in front of us. I could see little tendrils creep under the furniture, reaching for Lilia and me. Long finger-like limbs in a layered scales, bending at painful angles. One pulled down her phone, another moved a chair. 2 of them struggled to move the bed. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Passing the time." One of the tendrils closed around my stomach. There was pressure, like someone tightening a belt. It cut into my hips. Before the pain, I could feel a slight pop. "If you love me, why are you hurting me?" I asked. "How else are you going to get used to it?" she asked back. "Get used to what?" She turned to me, breath reeking of ammonia with every spit of a word. "Us!" A hand closed around my neck. My eyes flung open. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't feel my legs. I flailed with my arm, reaching for Lilia. She got out of bed only to find that her phone was gone. "What's wrong?" she asked. "What's happening?" She had to cover her mouth when she saw my neck. She grabbed my arm, but the moment she did, something took hold of her. In the corner of my eye, I saw her getting pulled into the other room, clawing at the carpet with a terrified shriek. My left arm rose out of the bed, as if carried by an unseen string. Two of my fingers popped out of their sockets like a painful countdown. I couldn't scream. I could barely think. No oxygen. Lilia came running back and grabbed me. She pulled on my arm and something let go. I fell out of bed, gasping for air as she cradled my head in her arms. I could see colour returning to my hands as two fingers turned purple. I didn't feel a thing, but I would in a couple of seconds. "Hold on," Lilia said. "Hold on." Her phone was gone. She bandaged my fingers and tried to keep them straight. "I'm sorry," I gasped. "I'm so sorry." She just shook her head, trying to process what had happened. There were no words. We just stayed there on the floor. But I could see something in the corners of the room. Little quirks and shades. Something was waiting for me to let my guard down. "What's hurting you?" she asked. "What is it?" Something broke in me as I swallowed my words, but Lilia deserved the truth. "I think she loves me." Over the coming weeks, I tried my best to explain. Lilia was terrified. She'd never seen anything like it, and there was no explanation that could settle her nerves. It's one thing to know someone you care about has trauma, but it is another thing entirely to experience something impossible that can make or break you. But Lilia didn't break. She started asking questions, but things were getting strange. It's as if thinking about Black-Eyed Susan brought her closer to us in a physical, literal way. Like we were building towards something. I would spot movement in the shadows. I'd notice furniture out of place and hear creaking doors in the middle of the night. And of course, it had to be her. She was playing with me. Lilia would stay up at night reading about various Scandinavian traditions. The cast-iron scissors under the pillow, the midsummer pole, the year walk, trolls, elves, dwarves and gnomes. She gave me lists of things to ask my parents about, to see if our family had been targeted by something ancient or evil. But weeks would come and go, and we wouldn't be anywhere close to an answer. And the shadows would grow longer. Things would disappear. And every night, when I closed my eyes, I'd catch a whiff of earthy wildflowers. Things would quickly progress beyond tricks and shadows. At one point, I was tripped while walking down a flight of stairs. Another time, something pressed down on the gas pedal, sending me straight through a red light. It's a miracle no one was hurt. Lilia wouldn't go unscathed either. Electronics would break or go missing. Odd sounds would wake her up at night. She told me that sometimes she'd see a silhouette outside the window, as if someone was trying to catch a peek of us. Every time she looked closer, it would turn out to be fallen leaves or a peculiar branch. It was stressful, but there wasn't really an option. What else could we do but to stick together and love one another? I don't remember the moment we moved in together. It just made sense since we spent all our time together anyway. She just moved more and more of her stuff in, and all of a sudden her place was pretty much empty. So yeah, we lived together. It wasn't really a conscious decision. Lilia had a couple of rough ideas about what that thing might be. She had a binder with ideas ranging from Arthurian mythology to djinn and some kind of Polish bird demon. None of them fit perfectly though, and frankly, it was such an odd thing for it all to be tied to this one ancient tradition. How could this thing be my true love? What was I missing? We figured it had to be something connected to that very first night back when I was a kid, when they had to put me in the bathtub to wake me up. For a full year, all we did was try to make it to the next day. It affected pretty much every aspect of our lives. The way we slept at night, the way we cooked, the way we did our laundry. There'd always be something messing up the rhythm of the day. It exhausted us. Not just mentally and physically, but socially. We stopped going out. Hell, we barely even talked. Instead, we kept our heads down and tried not to think about it too much, silently hoping for the problem to solve itself as Lilia's binder gathered dust. But once the next midsummer came around, there was a difficult discussion to be had. We can't live like this. She'd sat me down at the kitchen table. The light bulb had burned out somehow, despite only being 2 weeks old. "I'm sorry," I said. I wouldn't blame you if... I'm not going anywhere, she said. You know that. So what do we do? She looked around. The kitchen faucet was leaking again. I suppose we ought to try something, she said. You got any suggestions? She could kill us, I said. We can't go there. Maybe we don't have a choice. I just sat there in the dark, counting the seconds. She was right, of course, but that didn't mean I had to like it. As midsummer came, we decided we would do this together. We got a single large pillow and gathered the flowers together. We didn't say a word. We just walked among the wildflowers as a low rumble lingered on the horizon, a damp taste in the air as a storm brewed. But to me, all I could see was the woman I loved, and how she carefully brushed her hands against the tall grass. Even now she could find something to appreciate. Tradition, ritual, and myth be damned. At that moment, there wasn't a force in the world that could convince me that she was anything but my actual true love. We rounded out our wildflowers with a black-eyed Susan. It was hidden next to a rusted-out barrel, as if trying its best to hide. But like every other year I'd done this, I'd find one. And with all 7 wildflowers in hand, we bundled them up and wandered home, hand in hand. We hugged each other tight as we went to bed. Some way, somehow, we would make it through the night. We had to. When I opened my eyes, something felt different. I thought I was standing in sand, but it was more like a fine, concrete dust. The moon covered most of the night sky, but I couldn't see any stars. There were black trees in the distance, leafless and skeletonized by years of thirst. Along the horizon was a single large tree, tall enough to almost reach the moon itself. An apocalyptic vision, if anything. Who are you? A melodic voice, kind but unsure. I turned around. Lilia? My first thought was that she looked taller, but that wasn't it. She was the same as always. It was me that had gotten shorter. My hands were smaller. I looked down at the 7-year-old version of myself, still dressed in my most comfortable childhood jammies. Lilia didn't really sound any different, but a child's ears hear things in other ways. She had the most beautiful voice. "It's me," I said. Somehow. "You're really cute," she smiled, "but I don't get it." "I don't either. Maybe we're not supposed to." "Maybe." We wandered down a trail hand in hand. There was no one around. No wind blowing through dead plains, no birds in the sky, no chirping cicadas and no rustling leaves, just feet on dust. "There's no one here," I said. "This can't be it." "Did we do it wrong?" she asked. "I don't think so. She's usually here by now." Lilia blinked, looking around. Then something dark settled over her eyes. "What if she is?" She let go of me and brushed her arms up and down in a self-hug, something she usually did when stressed. We wandered around for what felt like hours. Nothing happened. No one came to disturb us. It was just her, me, and nothingness. No black-eyed Susan and nothing to tear us apart. "Does this mean you're my true love?" she asked. "I mean, I am dreaming of you." "That would make you mine too," I smiled. I thought that was occupied. I thought so too. But there was no one there to challenge that claim. We just smiled at one another. That had to be it. Despite it all, something good had to come out of this. But no matter where we went or for how long, nothing happened. We started to worry. We weren't waking up. We didn't get hungry, or thirsty, or tired. It was just this complete stage of emptiness. We would walk down forgotten paths for what felt like hours, strolling past sand-burnt concrete ruins. I don't know how much time passed. It might have been days, it might have been months. It was impossible to tell, and Lilia always had this amazing ability to make every moment pass by in a flash. She was impossible not to love. Even then, and even there, we'd make jokes and laugh, though I couldn't get over the feeling of being stuck in my younger self. You don't realise how much you've changed until you step back into old shoes like that. Then I noticed something. A flicker of yellow. Right there, behind a rusted-out old barrel, was a black-eyed Susan. The same yellow flower I'd found on that fateful midsummer night as a kid. I don't know how I recognised it, but I did. It was the same flower. It had to be. I picked it up and showed it to Lilia. "Strange, huh?" I said. "Only one of these I've seen around." "I wonder what it does," she said. "You think it means—" Her voice cut out. The light warped in front of me, blurring like I was watching through a thin layer of rushing water. I could feel a tingle in my eyes. Lilia looked different, further away. "Don't go," she called out. "What are you doing?" "I'm not. I just picked this. I held it out and dropped it, giving her one last flower. We drifted apart. Something shifted. My head rolled back, and I felt this intense heat settling into my head. Then a coolness, someone trying to lower my temperature. Young voices, terrified. Lilia drifting further away, screaming at me to stay with her. Her voice goes from beautiful to desperate to something else. She would scream how much she loved me, and then scream at how much she hated me. I would leave her in that place for what would equate to eternities, for her to twist and turn in a place where she'd have nothing but her thoughts and regrets, where a starless sky would seep into her, whispering things to do, ways she would play whenever I returned, her head spinning with tales of djinn and mares and demons. It would just be seconds passing as I felt her disappear, but in those seconds there would be eons, long enough for a body to forget what humans looked like, for a mind to forget what love is supposed to be, for a word or a phrase to change. True love. An ammonia-reeking scream reflected off a fractured space as she reached for me, trying to pull me back through the breaking light. A hand so warm that it burned my face. How could I be so cruel as to leave her for endless time to suffer? How could I be so selfish? Black-eyed Susan, Lilia, my one true love. Then I woke up. My head burst through the water as I looked up at my three sisters. I was 7 years old and still in my jammies, submerged in the bathtub of my childhood home. And as healthy young minds do, my memories healed themselves, sealing away a trauma for me to uncover years down the line. Life would turn out the same way. Awkward teenage years, short relationships, and I'd come back to that broken place time and time again, and she would play her games, reminding me of the betrayal she felt. And I wouldn't understand. That is, until one night when I woke up alone. We'd gone to bed together, but only one had made it back. I'd lived a life twice, and I hadn't even realised it. I stumbled into the shower, set it to cold, and collapsed. I could just think of one thing to say. "I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry." Another view of the world from behind a shimmer, be it warm tears or running water. Today, I'm 47, never married, no serious dating. I go back to Lilia every year, hoping I can find something to remind her of what she used to be. I've tried bringing things along, something to bring her back with me. I've yet to find anything useful. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes I try to stay a little longer, but the pain is unbearable. I suspect one day she'll kill me, and I won't come back. I suppose that's the only way this can end. I try not to think about it, but when I do, I try to convince myself that I will end up the same way as her. Maybe we can find solace in our madness. Maybe we'll live together in a paradise of dust and strange moons. I don't know. I don't think that old tradition just shows you true love. I think it will take you to a place where you can meet, but perhaps that place isn't what it used to be. Maybe there used to be more flowers and dancing. I've asked my sisters about what they've seen the times they've done this. All they tell me about is handsome men and blue skies. I guess we don't all go to the same place. After all, true love isn't the same for everyone. If there truly is someone for everyone, well, then we must face some hard facts. They could live across the world. They could have passed away. Or maybe they're just not what you expected. But the older I get, the less I worry. Maybe I'll wake up in that bathtub a third time, years from now. And if not, then at least I get to see her again. There must be something of Lilia left in Black-Eyed Susan. There has to be. Or else she wouldn't still be my one true love. Story 3. There's a mansion on the hill beside my house. I think it saw me. I live in a place called Halgrave. You won't find it on most maps, and if you do, your GPS will freeze the second you cross the old stone bridge. It's a town of about 500 people, tucked in a valley no one drives through unless they're lost. There's one diner, one gas pump, and a library run by a woman who hasn't said a word since her nephew disappeared 10 years ago. Growing up here means you get used to silence and secrets, especially about the hill. Behind the town there's a stretch of forest we call the thickets. Thick-trunked, black-barked trees packed so tight they blot out the sun even at noon. The local kids used to dare each other to touch the moss-covered milestone at the edge of the trail. No one ever stepped past it. No one smart, anyway. Past the forest, if you push deep enough, and people say not to, there's a hill. And on top of that hill stands Blackthorn Manor. We don't talk about the manor, not really. We talk around it. Someone might say they saw a light on the ridge last night, or that the wind sounded strange. But no one ever says the name. It's just understood. The last time anyone admitted going near it was in 2013. Her name was Ellie Mayhew. She was 16. One night she told her friend she was going to find out the truth about the house. She walked into the forest alone. They never found her. Her house has been boarded up since. I didn't plan to go looking for anything. But one night last summer, I saw something. I'd just finished a shift at the diner and was walking home down Main Row. The stretch of town with the old community centre, the boarded-up theatre, and Connor's garage. He's the only one in town who can fix a carburetor without a manual. I cut past the trail like I always do, and then I saw it. A faint light, pale, golden, coming from the top floor of the mansion. I froze. The forest around me went dead quiet. Not just night quiet. Wrong quiet. Then I heard a voice behind me. Ruth, you see that? It was Connor. Pale, sweaty, staring at the same light. That's not the moon, he said. Moon's behind us. I nodded, barely breathing. The light blinked off. The forest exhaled. The next morning, the librarian nailed a note to the post office door. Children must stay inside after dark. The house remembers. That was all it said. I thought maybe it was a prank. Until I got the envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just black wax sealed with a symbol I didn't recognise. Inside, one sentence written in careful, perfect handwriting. It saw you too. That night, I dreamed of footsteps behind my bedroom wall. Slow, patient ones. They haven't stopped since. I haven't told anyone. Not Connor, not my dad, not even Mrs. Calloway. But something in the town has changed. Dogs are barking at nothing. The post office clock is stuck at 3:33, and people are acting like they're trying very hard not to remember something. I think the house is waking up again, and I think it wants someone. Part 2, the house sent something into town. I didn't open the envelope again. I burned it. Watched the black wax curl and blister in a coffee can behind the shed. It didn't help. The next morning my dad didn't come downstairs. He usually made coffee before I woke up. I went to his room. His bed was untouched. The covers too tight, too flat, like a stage prop. His shoes were by the door, but the door was still locked from the inside. He just wasn't there. I called the sheriff's station. It rang twice. Then silence. Not a busy signal, not voicemail. Just silence. Like the phone had been picked up, but no one on the other end was breathing. I walked into town. It was foggy, but the sun was up. Fog doesn't hang like that in full daylight, not unless something's wrong. By the time I passed the old theatre, I noticed it. The silence was too wide. No birds, no wind, no sound of tyres or chatter, just my own footsteps on the sidewalk. Then I saw her. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, in a white dress, barefoot, standing in front of the Calloway Library. Her hair was wet, dripping. "Are you Ruth?" she asked. I nodded, stupidly. She smiled, but only with her mouth. Her eyes stayed dead. "Then it's your turn to go up the hill." I blinked and she was gone. I don't mean she ran. I mean she wasn't there anymore, like someone had edited her out of the frame. I ran to Connor's garage. He was there, half under a car, headphones in. When I banged on the hood, he flinched hard enough to hit his head. "You saw her too?" I asked. He just stared. "You got the envelope, didn't you?" He had one too. His was still sealed. He hadn't dared open it. We agreed not to talk about it in the open. Something was listening. That night, I locked my bedroom door and pushed the dresser in front of it. The town felt wrong, like we were insects sealed in a jar and something had just started tapping the glass. At 3:33 a.m., not 3:32, not 3:34, my doorknob turned. Not fast, slow, deliberate, like it was making sure I heard it. Then the whisper came through the wood, a dry, breathless voice that didn't sound angry. It sounded patient. "You don't have to walk to the house. We can bring it to you." The next morning, the road out of town was gone. Not blocked. Gone. Just trees. Unbroken forest. As if no one had ever built a road at all. Connor tried to drive out. He came back an hour later. Car totaled. Face blank. He wouldn't speak. Just sat there muttering numbers that didn't make sense. And that night, I dreamed of my dad, standing at the window of the manor, smiling. Behind him, something moved. It wore his skin, but it wasn't him.